So my name is Clay Robinson. I'm 36 years old and I am a professional brewer. I'm one of the founders of Sun King. Myself with my partner Dave Colt started Sun King in the summer of 2009. So we've been in business for about a year and a half, going on 2 years. I've been brewing professionally for the last 12 years. Graduated from college in 1997. I went to Wabash College and have a degree in rhetoric with an area concentration in business. One day the phone rang and my partner Dave Colt said, "Hey, I need Dustin's phone number." And I said, "Why do you need Dustin's phone number?" And he said, "Because I need somebody who can operate a brewery." And I said, "I can operate a brewery." And he said, "I thought you were done." I said, "I was done, but I've realized that it's what I want to do, and I'd love to come talk to you about it." So in December of 2008, Dave and I started working side by side at the Ram downtown Indianapolis, running that brewery and producing all the beers for downtown and the Northside store Fishers that they had just opened. And the conversation really started over a beer after work one day of what would you do if you could open your own brewery. And that conversation just kind of continued to thread through the 3 years that we worked together. We spent about a year trying to plan a brew pub, meeting every Sunday with a chef and a restaurant manager, talking about our ideas and what we would do and looking at properties. And after about a year of that, we kept pushing a string uphill because of property location, property value, square footage cost, lunch and dinner traffic, all of these different things. And quite honestly, I mean, Dave and I were in it to make beer, and so it got really frustrating. And one day I looked at Dave and I said, "What if we just make beer?" And he said, "Do you think it could work?" And there are plenty of breweries around the country that just make beer. So I'm going to go home, I'll run some numbers, which I'd already been doing all the numbers for the previous business plans anyway. And so I ran some numbers and I came back the next day. I'm like, it'll work. It's a completely different business. The numbers are different, but I think that there's definitely something here. And so we started kind of looking around, and all of a sudden it was like a light bulb went off, because Indianapolis has a dozen or so great brew pubs that make really good beer, do really good food, but Indianapolis did not have a brewery that it could call its own.
Hi, my name is Dave, the co-founder of Sun King with my partner Clay. I'm also the head brewer, so I'm in charge of the brewery operations. So from grain to glass is what I control in my little kingdom. I guess my real title, brewer, is sort of like a scientist meets a mad scientist meets chef. And then I take raw ingredients and taste them and figure out the best way to put them together in order to make the best beer humanly possible. From grain to glass, so what we do is we'll take some malted barley and we'll measure that out. We'll crack it open gently. We'll infuse it or steep it in some hot water. Enzymes are going to start to work on the sugar or on the starches that were developed by the maltster and turn it into sugar. Sugar is what we need for the yeast to eat, and that converts that sugar into alcohol, which we lovingly refer to as beer.
My name is Adrian Ball. I'm the assistant brewer here at Sun King. Basically what I just finished up doing now was mashing in, which is a process where we will bring cracked grain into the mash tun, mix it with hot water. We'll let it rest for about 45 minutes. During that time period, what's happening is the starches are converting into fermentable, non-fermentable sugars. So we're extracting color and flavor from the cracked grain right now. Let's start a process where we call vorloffing. Basically, we will recycle that wort, as it's called at this point, back on top of itself to help clarify the wort and to pull any husk or grain matter that might sink through the mash bed. Put that back on top, help clarify it, and then we'll start running that into the brew kettle.
The sugar's developed, then we pump it from the mash tun over to the brew kettle. We'll boil it and we'll add hops to add bitterness, flavor, and aroma to that beer and really sort of amp up the spiciness of the beer. We'll then take it from the kettle and put it in the whirlpool. We're going to spin out the hop vegetable matter in the whirlpool through centripetal force. We'll then go through the heat exchanger, cool it all down, and add yeast in the fermenter. Then the yeast is going to get to work and make lovely, lovely beer. On average, our beers take about 2 weeks for full fermentation. They can take a whole lot longer than that Depends on the alcohol content and the type of yeast. So after fermentation is done, we're going to cool the beer down and run it through filtration. So we pull the yeast away, we put it into a tank, make it nice and fizzy, and boom, kegs, cans, or growlers, your choice.
This is where we keep all of our cans. One of the reasons why most small breweries don't can is to do any canning, you have to buy a minimum of 75,000 cans. So it's not necessarily more expensive per unit than bottling, but I could order a single pallet of bottles for my beer, but I have to buy 75,000 cans to make it worth the while for a canner. So we buy 75,000, 150,000 can batches from Ball Corporation in Monticello, Indiana. If you buy any beverage in a 16-ounce can east of the Mississippi in America, it's produced in Monticello, Indiana, which I thought was pretty cool. So if you buy a Rockstar energy drink or a PBR Tall Boy in New York City, that can is actually produced in Monticello, Indiana. The cans are offloaded onto the shaker table, and they come down the chute where they're turned upside down and they're sprayed with a cleaning solution to make sure there's no dust or particulate matter in the can. They're then turned back right side up, and they move into the center of the machine where they're filled with CO2, which is heavier than air, so it creates a vapor seal. And then they're moved into the next phase where they're filled with whatever beer we're canning that day. So the liquid pushes the CO2 up to the top, and the can is then passed underneath the lids. The lid is laid on top, and force is applied to the edge of the can top to create a perfect seal. The enemies of beer are air and light, so by creating a vapor seal, you prevent the beer from coming in contact with air. By sealing it in a can, you prevent it from having any light pollution, which is why cans are actually superior to bottles in terms of protecting the product.
This is just a great break. It's such a great success story how Sun King has just come on the scene and has just gone wonderful. And I'd buy stock if they were offering it, but they're not yet.
And the beer's good.
The beer's good. That's absolutely
really
right.
good.
The way the tasting room works is that we give everybody that comes in the door has to show their ID because of state law, and then we hand them 4 tickets. They're varying colors, but the 4 tickets for a sample of each of our house beers, and then depending on how many seasonals we have 4 at the moment, but we've only given them 2 bottle caps, and so they have to make a choice of what they want to sample.
The tasting room is a big reason why we're successful. There's really good energy here. People like being able to see a brewery in progress. In our original plans, we actually had architectural drawings for a tasting room that was walled in and more like a bar, and we didn't have the money to do that up front. And it's one of the worst things that happened to us, because if we did build that tasting room, we would be unable to actually serve the volume of customers who come in, and I don't think it would be nearly as interesting an experience.
Dave and I started this brewery because brewing beer is our passion. It's what we want to do for a living. So, technically this is the last job that I ever want to have, and it's really less of a job than it is a passion.
Every day that I walk in is like the very first day that I walked into a brewery. The way the malt, the cracked malt hits the hot water, and that smell, it's just is a heavenly smell. And it's one of the things that attracted me to brewing in the first place. When I smelled that, I said, I'm home. I can't believe that somebody gets to do a job where they get to smell this every day and make beer.
One of the guys asked me if I'd ever thought about making beer for a living. To which I replied that I didn't even know it was a job until I met him. And he said, well, it is a job and I think you'd be really good at it. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, but you need to know that it's hot, it's sweaty, it's sticky, and it's dirty. You're basically a glorified janitor, but at the end of the day, you get to sit back with a pint of beer that you made. And then he sipped his beer, smiled, and said, it's delicious.